Greetings, programs, and welcome back to a new episode of the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and I am your host. And with me today, as is standard operating procedure, is Simon. Say good morning, Simon.
Yo, what's up?
Oh, no, never do that again.
So,
we are both too white for that, sir.
I was happily reliving something I just remembered as we started the podcast, which is when we've got some very good family friends, and my son and their daughter are best friends, and my daughter and their second daughter are also best friends. And so the younger daughter came over, and we've known them since they were babies. And she turned up with her dad, and her dad's just like cool Vancouver dad. And I said to the girl, I was like, yo, what, how's it going? And my daughter just turned and looked at me with the biggest eyes I've ever seen, and just grabbed me and just started pushing me back in the house wordlessly.
I mean,
what are you doing? She went, what are you doing? She's like, Dad, don't do that. But I've always said that to her. It's like, no. So my kids
you are going to have either the best or worst time as the father of a teenage girl. And I look forward to witnessing that.
What's interesting is that my son is 12, and embarrassing him, especially with terrible humor, is one of my favorite things. That moment when a joke lands and it physically hurts him and he can't hide it. Like the other day I said, hey, what's the opposite? They were trying to do their shoelaces and one got knotted. I said, hey, Elliot, what's the opposite of a knot? And he was like, because now he knows, like, what? I said, an is. And he just sat there and looked out the window and just contemplated his life choices. And,
did it start to lightly rain in the background with like a violin playing? Because that's just...
But the difference is my daughter's now old enough to start being embarrassed by me, which is a wonderful revelation. But she gets embarrassed in a different way. Like, she gets emotionally wrought at how embarrassed I could make her. And so now I have that knowledge. I'm openly and actively trying to exploit it. Like dancing in public is a line that I crossed recently, and she didn't like that much. But especially,
you don't dance in public because you're British. That has nothing to do with being a parent.
We dance in public, but it depends how you define dance. Like on the Latino to a rock scale, we're closer to the rock. But she gets embarrassed, especially around her friends, and so that's really useful information for me. I'm definitely going to use that in the future. Yeah, she's going to hate me when she's 16. She's going to absolutely hate me.
But she's also going to be like queen bee at whatever school she's in, so it'll
yeah, that's true.
It'll work out.
That's true. So yeah, I'll never introduce myself on the podcast by saying yo, what's up ever again. I was just enjoying the moment.
I mean, I'm sure you will, and we'll all be embarrassed as a result. But we're middle-aged and white, so we're just embarrassed as a...
I know.
As a way of being.
Just generally, just as background noise. That's our...
Yeah.
That's our, like, Big Bang background radiation is embarrassment.
Yeah. And
how are you?
I'm fine. I have been on, well, quote, holiday for the past couple of weeks. I was away on the island, as if you listened last week, you would know. And also, I've just been having a really good time. I don't have children, so I get to cuddle with cats and also watch movies all the time. And I can tell you, it's been an interesting time for movies. Basically, I've had a really good time the last couple of weeks. William Friedkin recently died, so we rewatched The Exorcist, which is on my all-time favorites list. We rewatched Mars Attacks, which I hadn't watched in quite a while, which is like a gold standard level 90s Tim Burton for me. That I don't know why. I know why it didn't connect at the time, and thematically I think we're going to be talking something along these lines about one of the movies today, but because it was such a throwback to a very specific thing that not everyone got. But I have always loved that movie, and I think I distinctly remember being the only one for a time, so I was happy to revisit it. And I commenced a tradition that I'm very happy about, which is I rewatched 65 for the first of what I'm sure will be roughly a bazillion times this week.
Oh, really?
I get to do Adam Driver, the spaceman caveman shooting dinosaurs. You're telling me that is rewatchable as fuck, man.
I
I've
haven't thought
just
about rewatching it
I've
personally.
just stunned Simon into silence, which I think is
I
always a win for me.
my feeling with that movie is that it had such a huge pace drop in the middle. It doesn't feel like the kind of thing I would rewatch. It's not the kind of shtick I would put on in the background because it's not that.
Oh, I didn't put it on
I
in the background. We full on watched it.
or all that, all that too. Interestingly, I put on Mars Attacks recently for the first time since it came out. I haven't seen that thing in decades. I still don't. It's not for me, even though I love B movies. There's something about it that doesn't work. But I had completely forgot the number of people cameos in that movie.
Not even just
What?
cameos, like the number of people
Just
who are just in that movie,
yeah,
generally
just
speaking. Like,
that is a director like calling in every favor and just getting it's just relentless. Oh look, it's him or her. Oh, and I'd forgotten about all of them.
I mean,
So
yeah, like
that
Annette
was fun.
Bening, Danny DeVito, Martin Short, Sarah Jessica
Mhm.
Parker, Michael J. Fox,
Natalie
Rod
Portman.
Rod Steiger, Natalie Portman, two Jack Nicholsons.
Yes.
uh, who else? Paul Winfield's in it. Pam Grier's in it. Jack Black
Hmm.
is in it. Lucas
Hmm.
Haas. Like, there's so many people, and it's
Hmm.
from a certain time when people like Jack Black was not famous at the time. It was a very early
Hmm.
role for him, and his girlfriend's the character of his girlfriend, whose I believe character name is Trailer Park Girlfriend. I think her name in the movie is like Sharon or something like that. But that's Christina Applegate, and she has like two lines. Um, it's pretty incredible how many people are in that movie for sure.
Hmm.
And it's like came out in '96, so it's like almost 30 years old now, which is just
Hmm.
crazy to think about. That I'm old enough for that movie to be almost 30 years old. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have
Wow.
a minor
Oh my god.
existential crisis while I think about that.
Wow.
But yeah, I've always loved that movie. I actually had a poster for that movie on my bedroom wall.
Of course you did. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. Um, we're not going to talk much about this because I know this is triggering. But I finally watched the Star Trek musical episode and enjoyed that. And I have mixed feelings, but my only feeling I'm going to convey to you, there's two feelings actually. My main feeling is that Status Report is a bona fide masterpiece. Like that, I've just been listening to the first song over and over and over and over because that's how you do a musical theatre ensemble song. It's just like a perfect example of a scene setting ensemble intro song. Beautiful, beautiful chord structures, and just really nice transference from one person to the other. And my second thought is the unfortunately the only thing I'm one of the things I'm truly good at is making up very specific songs about things. So if I'd known this earlier, I probably would have tried to get into musical theatre writing because I would love to write songs for like kids shows or very specific songs about things because I'm really really good at that and
I mean,
listen to the rest.
start a TikTok. You could do that.
Yeah, no, I'm 46. I'm not starting a TikTok. But I just please just let me out the rest of those songs. I would love to, because the guy who wrote the music is very very good at composing music. The all the songs are really distinct. Some are better than others, but they're all like good from a musical perspective. But a lot of the lyrical refrains, I just wish I could have a pass at those, and that's a little bit frustrating to me. But that first song's amazing and
I mean, I very generally disagree. I don't think every song on that show is a huge hit. Um, I think there's only two that I actively don't. I don't dislike them, but now that I have the soundtrack on my phone, there's two that I
you
skip
can
basically every time, and they're both sung by the same person, which was one of
yeah,
my main
yeah, right.
complaints. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's because they have that person as a terrible voice. I think because I know for a fact that person studied music and studied singing
Mm,
in school, but
it's not great though.
I do. Oh, it's a very what's the word
Oh,
for it?
it's not a great voice.
It's a very like stagey way of singing, which is fine.
It's
I
also
don't.
really shallow.
But I guess my bigger problem is well, yeah, but then also that person in the ensemble pieces, her parts of it are good. So
Yeah.
But with a cast as big as that, I don't know why any one person would have more than one solo song, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
must have been something to do with who was willing to sing. Kind of like how in the Buffy musical, Michelle Trachtenberg, uh, Dawn, has a dance number instead of a song because she specifically requested that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, because like, yeah, like the pilot Ortegas has a great voice, but she has like one line in the finale and one stanza in the intro, and that's it. And I feel like they could have had I mean, they had some emotional character growth in earlier episodes and in the next episode, so maybe not. But I think the key with it is that with anything like this, I think it's a good example of how if you start on a banger and end on a banger, you're probably fine. Like that's what people are going to remember.
Yeah, I do think they missed a trick by having the most handsome man in the universe who can clearly sing and not have his own like proper solo.
Well, he did, but then
Uh,
they cut it off as part of a joke, which I also don't. Which is a funny bit,
well,
but I
I don't
kind of
count
wish he
that.
had
Yeah,
more.
no,
I,
that's not a
I
full
kind of
solo.
wish he had more. I kind of wish that their private conversation song had been a full song and not cut off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it
But
also makes sense in that like his character is very much like I don't want to be expressing my feelings, and then they cut him off mid feeling. So yeah, it makes sense.
yeah, yeah. But I would love to hear Christina Chong, who plays I don't know say her name, Lan
Laan.
Khan. I'd love to hear her because she absolutely tore. Her voice is beautiful. She's done. She was Talia Conti trained in musical theatre, which suddenly makes sense, and her voice is beautiful.
She
And
also has a number of she has like an EP and a number of singles out if you
yeah,
really
yeah,
want
they're
to.
all really good. I listened to those on Friday. They're all really, really good. And the Uhura actor, who you will tell me the name because you've told me about 5 or 6 times this week how much you like her.
Yes,
She's an amazing singer as well.
it turns out that Tony nominated actress Celia Rose Gooding can really fucking sing.
Who'd have thought?
And it's interesting because like I know you don't like jukebox musicals, and
Hmm.
I have an interesting relationship with them that I think if you can make the context correct, I think they can be great. Um, but she was nominated for a Tony for the Alanis Morissette musical, which is a '90s set thing featuring the music of the album Jagged Little Pill. And I looked up the cast recording of that, and yeah, she can really fucking sing.
Mm.
And the reason she didn't win a Tony for that show is that someone else from that show won that Tony. So
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, her solo and then her like sort of like MC part of the finale, I think is great. But my honestly, my main complaint about the Star Trek musical is that there just wasn't enough dancing, and
Yeah, absolutely agree. 100%.
I know some of it makes sense. But also, like, please more. If we're gonna do a musical, let's also do dancing. And I rewatched the Buffy musical, and there's not a ton of dancing in that one either, and that's also one of my minor complaints about that episode. Like there is dancing, but there's not a ton.
But
So
there's significantly more than the Strange New Worlds episode, though.
it's actually really only um, I'll Never Tell where Xander and Anya sing about their like little nitpicks about one another. That has a big dance number, and then the finale has a big dance number, and that's kind of it. And it's sort of the same
which
amount of
which
dancing.
which is significantly more than Strange New Worlds had.
It's the same number. Like there's dancing in the Connect to Your Crew song, and there's dancing in
Oh,
the finale. It's the same number of.
barely. It's
Having watched them recently back to back, there is roughly the same amount of dancing, and it bothers me both times. So, do with that information what you will.
I don't agree at all, but I agree that I would have liked more dancing in Strange New Worlds for sure.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's a
mean, there
bit
is
just.
Dawn does have like a dance number, but it's a dance number, not a song a dance number. That's
I feel like it was just a missed opportunity all around, really. Especially, I wonder as well the quality of the first song in terms of the songwriting and the way they handled it as well. The camera work is beautiful as well. I wonder if the first song and the last song were kind of their concepts, and then they almost put too many resources into getting the big ensemble pieces right, and the other ones didn't really get the love. Like there were too many songs where they were just walking around, walking around their little space, and that was
I mean,
disappointing.
I'm sure the answer will turn out to have been that they just didn't they didn't give enough time to the rehearsal process. is I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure what it is, because that would be like, I know for, and I keep coming back to it because it's probably the gold standard of musical episodes. But
Mm-hmm.
for Once More with Feeling on the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they built something like 3 months of rehearsal time into their shoot schedule. So
Mm-hmm.
they were rehearsing while they weren't shooting the preceding episodes. They were rehearsing for that episode, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, very probably speaking, they did not put that level into the Star Trek episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for whatever reason, whether money or cast preferences or both. But I mean, I still loved it. Like, because it would be so easy. I think the one thing that both of them really get right, that is to say, Once More with Feeling and Subspace Rhapsody, is that rather than just being like, time out, we're doing a musical this week, they weave all the ongoing narratives into the songs and give characters emotional catharsis through the songs for their ongoing narratives and their ongoing arcs. And I think that that's really important, and it lends an emotional weight that would otherwise not be there. So
Mm-hmm.
like, and there's a couple, like, I don't I don't know if you do you watch the show, like, have you watched it on
No,
an ongoing basis?
no,
So
no.
like, there's a song called "I'm Ready," which is where Nurse Chapel has gotten this news she's going to be going away, and she basically breaks up with Spock, um, in song, which is probably the danciest song in the whole episode, which I appreciate it for. But it's also just a super interesting character development, because everyone has been expecting Spock to like go back to logic and break up with her. So having her break up with him is super interesting and makes
Mm,
their like unrequited thing that happens in the original series like 1,000 times more interesting.
mm,
Um, and just having like Kirk come on board and like gain some development, and having Christina Chong like gain some character development. Like, everyone who got a solo got some pretty significant character development, which I very much appreciate.
mm,
So it's not like an
mm,
episode you can just skip.
mm.
It's actually maybe
Yeah,
one of the most important ones, and
yeah, yeah.
I think that
No,
that's really a really
absolutely.
smart way to do it.
Yeah, that was evident. Even though I haven't seen the episodes that led up to it, that was really, really clear that there were some. It wasn't a throwaway episode. They actually treated it as moving stories forward, which is great.
Yeah, but definitely my wife is like, she'll like walk into a room and she'll be like, "What are you singing?" I'll be like,
All the bloody time.
yeah,
Uh, just like when I'm washing, just one line. I appear to be singing. Just all.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love songs where they can't work out why they're singing. It happens a few times, and I really enjoy
yeah. But yeah, she definitely will walk into me and I'll be like, "Apologies, a most
it.
confounding thing." Anyway, it's
That first song, man. It's pretty perfect. I don't blame you.
yeah. Again, I would also argue that the last two songs are also pretty close to perfect, I think. Although
I mean,
again,
the
the
last song
sec
does
the last second to last song definitely could have should have had a dancing group of people around the person doing the solo, but
a million
other than
times,
that,
yes. I don't know how much we should spoil this, but the last song is broken in the middle of itself
oh, it's already over. So it was a week
by
ago, and it's already all over social media. So I'm not really
oh,
worried about
okay.
spoiling the
The
quote
the the
K-pop
Cl-
moment.
the Klingon K-pop group was an entirely unexpected and wonderful surprise, and I would have liked a little bit more of that lunacy. But and what's always really fun is that um, it's at that moment you realize that the Klingons have all been played by dancers up to this point. They hired dancers to act like Klingons, and that always really amuses me. It's like, oh, they're actually dancers, and that means they're having the time of their life, like being aliens too. That's nice.
Well, there's other two things. There's a couple things I like about that scene, just from like a technical standpoint as well. One is that the Klingon captain is played by an actor called Bruce Horak, I believe is his name. But anyway, he played the character of Hemmer in season one, so they brought him back for this cameo, which I very much appreciate, because he was a recurring cast member in the first season. But also, like, if you go online, you'll find tons of stodgy Star Trek fans being like, "It should have been a Klingon opera." But first off, that would have been the K,
What?
like, the K-pop is definitely like a subversion of expectations,
What?
but also like, it just, like, one of my bigger complaints, and it's not really a complaint, but one of the bigger things I always notice in science fiction, especially Star Trek, which I love, is that every alien species, every alien society is basically a monoculture, right? Like they're all, we only ever see this one subsection of them. And
Mm-hmm.
I just really like that the K-pop scene makes it very clear that the Klingons contain multitudes that maybe we didn't understand that they had before.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because yeah, if this was
Mm-hmm.
TNG, it would have been a Klingon opera because
Yeah.
that's all Worf ever listened to, and that's the only thing we have any context for
Mm-hmm.
is Klingons according to Worf. And I very much appreciate that they have more to them than just that.
Yeah.
You
Oh, yeah, it
know,
was great.
and
It,
we
it
very
didn't.
very infrequently get to see more of that. Like there's a I don't know if it's a great episode. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but there's an episode in Enterprise where Archer meets a Klingon lawyer, and even in that episode, the lawyer is like, everyone, you know, for a time we were one kind of society. We weren't just one thing, and now everyone wants to be a warrior and have honor. And like, there's a whole little conversation about how they've become this
Interesting.
monoculture, and I've always really appreciated that. So I
That's
appreciate that
interesting.
this gives further depth to the Klingons via K-pop.
It's a very interesting idea that I'd never even heard or thought of, that Klingons shifted to the warrior thing and not were always like that. Interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, well, look at us
Anyway,
talking about Star Trek again.
yeah, we're not going to talk about this for too long. 15 minutes later, uh, we should probably talk about some
Anyway,
movies though. So before we do that, let's just get some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way the first time. So, of course, if you're enjoying the show, um, please feel free to support us and tell your friends. Those are some easy ways to do that. One is tell your friends. Another is give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. Like, subscribe, all of that stuff. And of course, we do have a Patreon, which is the most direct way to support us, which you can find at patreon.com/mcsimpson. Um, and so now we're going to move on to talking about two movies. And before we do, I'd just like to again point out that the 2023 WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes are ongoing. And both of these films were released during said strikes. And neither of them would be possible without the labor and love of the people who made them. And so, for that reason, we obviously stand with both of those unions, and we hope they go back to the tables. I hope that the studios go back to the table soon and negotiate and give them a fair deal. Because the reason those strikes are ongoing are not because the unions don't want to negotiate; it's because the studios don't. And every time they go back to the table so far, although I haven't heard what happened on Friday, uh, uh, every time they go back to the table, the studios just go, no, no. Are you guys? They just go, are you ready to cave yet? And the workers go, no, and then they keep striking. So you're going to
no.
see. We've already started to see a literal ton of articles from the trades that basically try and frame everything as being the striking workers' fault. But you heard it here last that it's actually the studio's fault for being greedy, stingy bastards.
Mm-hmm. For
Anyway,
sure.
so let's move on. Let's talk about. We're going to talk about two different movies, both of which are good. But first off, let's talk about the recent Netflix release. They cloned Tyrone. And Simon, you've watched this a lot more recently than me, so why don't you give us the
Oh.
quick and dirty lowdown?
Um. Okay. This is one of those movies you don't want to talk too much about it, because the joy of discovering the weird parts of this film is one of the main plus points. But John Boyega plays a character called Fontaine in an American city in in like the low poverty areas of low income rather areas of an American city. Is it established which city? I can't remember.
I think we only ever learn of its name as the Glen. That's all we ever really
Right.
know. Is that the
So
neighborhood's
the
called the Glen?
neighborhoods in the Glen. So it's like a five boroughs, like it's like the Bronx. He's one of a number of people who basically traffic drugs and information, and brutally deal with anyone who they consider to be stepping in on his turf. And we learn he does this because he's motivated by the death of his brother when he was younger, and he does have a heart though. He does his best to look after those around him, like kids and homeless people and whatever. He does have an honor system, and he does try to look after people, but it's very clear that he's in this rut of low income that we see so much in American cities at the moment, and um, just trying to survive as a black man in a black neighborhood where so many people are out to hurt you and to kill you. And he has frequent run-ins with another um, guy who has another group. I don't want to say gang because it's not really established as a gang, but they are definitely rivals, and it gets very, very brutal. And through the course of the beginning of the movie, there's an event happens that kind of makes him question his reality around him, and it's this question that leads him down a path together with Jamie Foxx's character, who is a pimp called Slick Charles, and one of his ladies on his employment roster is Yo-Yo, played by the wonderful Tayona Paris, and the three of them uncover a huge government plot right underneath them to affect society itself. And then the movie is them standing up for themselves and trying to fight back against this terrible, terrible thing that's happening without them even realizing it's like a control system. And that's really all I can say without spoiling anymore. And what's interesting about this film is that it's the street scenes are filmed through a very, very thick film grain. It's almost got a 70s look, even though it's set in modern day. Jamie Foxx very openly still dresses like he's in the 70s and acts like a 70s pimp. But it's a modern day movie, but it has this real grainy look. And then when they uncover more of the plot and they discover some technological aspects, the technology, it isn't like shiny brand new tech. It really feels like something out of the Fallout games, which is kind of analog, with like cathode ray readouts and digital readouts. And I really, really like that. The
Yeah,
product, the design of this was great, I thought, of the tech.
it's a real like retro future feel. Like
Mm,
it's definitely not the present, but it's also definitely not the
mm,
past. It's it's there's futuristic science and there's anachronistic tech and
mm,
anachronistic dress, and I'm actually a big fan of the way like this movie is shot to look like a 70s blaxploitation film. So if you've
mm,
ever watched any blaxploitation stuff at all, but especially 70s blaxploitation, which I guess is the main period of it, but like it's openly right down to the level of film grain. It is openly trying to look like one of those whilst being this genre bending thing, and
mm.
I very much appreciated that.
The I mean, it's called They Cloned Tyrone, so you will understand and extrapolate from that title that there is a cloning element in this, so that's not really a spoiler. And what I thought was interesting is that it would make a really good companion pieces to Jordan Peele's Us, in that it shared lots of quite similar themes of uncovering versions of self and then fighting back against that kind of conspiracy of replication for nefarious aims, and underlying it's it's fundamentally this sci-fi mix, sci-fi blaxploitation mix, but it's really about institutionalized racism and the surprising things uh, surprising decisions that some people from within that community will take to stop people getting killed. So there's lots of comments here about um, eugenics. There's comments about black on black crime and how needless it is, and how it's encouraged by certain groups of people for different aims and different means. And it says a lot. There's a lot in this movie, and there's a lot of comment in this movie, and it feels very authentic to the things it's trying to say as well. It doesn't feel like it's pandering. doesn't feel exploitative in itself. It talks about exploitation very openly, and it talks about racism, but it doesn't feel kind of, it's not using it just as a story tool. It's actually got some interesting things to say, I thought.
Yeah, I think your call out of Us as being a nice companion piece makes makes sense. I think, and I think we one of us talked about this when we were texting about it during the week. But another companion piece in terms of like the lengths people will go to sort of manage the black population in American cities. It makes it also a really good companion piece to. Um, oh wow, the name of it's gone straight out of my head. Sorry to bother you. The Boots Riley film from a few
You
years
know
ago.
what? I texted you. This feels like a Boots Riley movie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just.
So a lot of the same sort of thematic ground being trod
Mm,
on in different ways. So like, interestingly, I think watching all three of those movies together would probably be a hell of a triple feature, and leave you with
yeah.
some thoughts and feelings about the way that America treats people,
Hmm.
um, and rightly so. Um, but I mean, for me, like before we even get into talking about the performances, I absolutely loved just again the production design. I
Mm,
can't get over all the costuming, the consistent level of the way the tech looks, even though some of it's meant to be futuristic and some of it's meant to be
mm,
anachronistic. I love the design of the whole thing, and I I know that the film grain thing is not going to work for everyone, but like again, if you've watched a lot of like gritty, grimy movies from the '70s, one thing that sets it apart from Sorry to Bother You, which is also sort of openly um, using some of the same tropes, is that this one like very much so is visually trying to be one of those, right?
mm,
Not just like pay homage, but like I mean it is an homage, but like it's not trying to update the look to be more modern. It's trying to like if you watch this without knowing, there's a not really a chance because of the level of the technology involved. But if you just like put stills of this side by side with some black exploitation or even just like gritty, grimy
mm,
thrillers from the '70s, there's a chance you might not know that they weren't contemporary to one
mm,
another. Like it's
mm,
very successful at recreating that look, and I really I love
mm.
that about it.
You never saw
Um,
Doom Patrol, did you? In term, just to interject there for a second, if you like that look, that kind of tech, and the mix of overground underground, it reminded me so much of Doom Patrol, which is probably my favorite thing to come out of DC. And it got cancelled because the numbers dropped, unfortunately. But yeah, I really encourage you to seek it out because did you ever watch Doom Patrol? I don't know if
I
you did.
watched the whole first season,
Right.
I believe. And then for
Um,
whatever reason, I think that was around the same time that I got sort of tired with the CW universe, like the Arrowverse.
right.
And I sort of gave up
The
on all of them.
there's a season of Doom Patrol where they find a very similar controlling underground lab with people trapped in it with terrible things being done to them, and the technology is the same. It's the same kind of look. So, um, if you are interested in that, then definitely seek that out.
Yeah. Um, and then we haven't even talked about, and I know you're not a fan of all of them, but I thought everyone in this was really good, but in particular John Boyega and Teyonah Parris. I know I think that Jamie Foxx gives exactly the performance that he's asked to give, and that's either going to work for you or not because it is
Mm,
such a pastiche of like '70s characters. Um, but it doesn't really matter to me because John Boyega is so good and Teyonah Parris is
mm,
so good in this film. They're it's shocking to me that John Boyega is only 31 years old, which means he made
mm,
this when he was 30 probably,
mm,
and because he's so nuanced, he definitely has a weight of the world someone at 30 maybe shouldn't have that he's on his shoulders that he's able to express,
mm,
and because he says so much whilst delivering so little dialogue in so many scenes in this film, with just his face and body language that it's just incredible, and it really bothers me that this film is. I mean, it's 2 weeks later that we're talking about it because we had other stuff going on. But this film has already been buried by the Netflix algorithm. Yes, it's a Netflix
mm,
film, but I watched it on day one, which for the record was the same weekend as Barbenheimer. Um, and it's just been buried. And I feel like in a more just world, Barbenheimer weekend would have been like Barbenheimer Rhone weekend, because this is also a great film.
Barbenheimer, own, you say?
Yeah. Or they
It's
clone Barbenheimer. I don't know. Like, do take however you want to make the portmanteau work, man. I just say that, like, on that weekend, we're all talking about Barbie and we're all talking about Oppenheimer, but we should have been talking about this in the same breath.
I think it's a tough sell, though. I think this is potentially a much tougher sell to get people into theaters than either of those other two movies, because it is a combination of two very niche genres told in a very specific way, and I don't think that's the kind of thing that's going to get people
So
into an audience
I'm
at the
not
moment.
disputing that, but what I am saying is that we'll never know because Netflix had it buried 12
Mm,
hours after it came out on the
mm,
platform, which is always the problem with Netflix, right? Like, Netflix makes a lot of bad movies, but they
it's
make a lot of good
bizarre.
movies too, and it doesn't really seem to matter
It's
what
so
level of
weird.
quality it is. Like
Right,
this, when
exactly.
I loaded up Netflix on the day this movie came out, this movie was not on the front page. It just was. I had to
It's
search for it. I had to know it was there.
it's so weird to me. It's so weird to me coming from like when we were younger, when there were movies, you got the feeling that studios were kind of through promotion would be kind of uh what's the word um proud of the things they made, right? So they would push it to the front. Even even it's like TV movies got adverts and things, got commercials, and when I was trying to load this up, and again I had to search for it specifically, but what I did see on my front page was a new buddy action movie with John Cena
Hmm.
and Jackie Chan. Uh, and I watched the and it auto plays the trailer, and it looks like a really respectable, funny buddy, the kind of buddy movie that would have got people in cinemas for weeks and weeks and weeks in the 2000s. Like,
Or
yeah,
especially the '90s.
your Chris Rock kind of buddy movie, or the Western version, Shanghai Noon, that kind of thing that would have a couple of weeks in the cinema and then it would do great on DVD and people would still talk
Yeah, you
about
mean
that.
like every other Jackie Chan movie?
Right, exactly. And it's just like it's just there without any. I haven't seen a single commercial for it. I haven't seen anything. The only Netflix commercials I've seen are that terrible looking Heart of Stone with Gal Gadot, sorry. And it's so weird to me to see a movie like that I probably would have been really into with no promotion, no fanfare. They've spent money to make it, and it's so weird to me that they would just sort of put it there for a moment and then it's gone. And I find that just fascinating and depressing, and it's just so weird to me that they are making all of this stuff. It's almost like a shotgun approach. It's like
Almost.
we're just gonna
Almost.
all right, all right. I'm trying to be
No.
generous. Like we're gonna make, and then something will eventually stick. You'll get another Bridgerton, or you'll get another whatever, and it will stick, and people will come and watch it, and then we'll just keep make, and it's like weird to me. It doesn't feel like there's any pride in it in doing that. And if I was involved in that in the writing or the direction. I mean, this is why people are striking, aren't they? If I was involved in this, to see it sort of appear in like this is in our top 10 for an hour and then it's gone. Like, why are we even bothering? Why am I? Why do we do this? Why have I spent 3 months making this movie for it to be an afterthought after nailed it season 3, and like all the reality shows, and then there's this movie and then it's done. It's such a weird world that we live in, and it's so different to the cinema experience from when we were even like 20 years younger. Like, it's just a whole different thing now.
I mean, honestly, even at this point, almost even just 10 years ago.
Right, it does feel
Right?
like that. Can we blame the pandemic for this, that they just
No. No. I mean, so on the one hand, a little bit, but on the other hand, no, not at all. I think for me, I saw a really interesting quote. I think it was on Twitter and it was like 2 weeks ago. I think it was the critic Matt Zeller Seitz, and he was basically the thrust of what he was saying was that, like, it used to be that the heads of entertainment companies all wanted to be Jack Warner, and now they just all want to be billionaires.
mm,
And that I found that really interesting because it wasn't that Jack Warner wasn't a shrewd business person, but he was concerned with making movies, right?
Mm,
He was using, he was making movies, and that he was rich was definitely a product of that, but it wasn't the first thing. You know what I mean? I guess is the way to
mm-hmm,
say it. Whereas like
mm,
now it's very much like they're all chasing. I mean, it's, I hate to say it, but it's Netflix's fault, right? Netflix isn't a movie company; they're a tech company. They're a tech company with a grossly overpaid pair of CEOs, and every other studio is chasing that model because every CEO wants to be grossly overpaid. And
mm,
I think that the when we all started referring to the film and television work on these platforms as content, I think it was basically over. Like,
mm,
we're not over, but like we're gonna have to change that. It's not just content; it's film and TV, and more
yeah.
importantly, it's all art. It's not just content. It's not just stuff to make people subscribe. It's art, and we need to respect it as such. And I feel like the tech company model that Netflix has pioneered doesn't respect it. And
Mm,
I think that's evidence in the way that every tech company treats the currently striking workers. And like,
mm,
and if you think it's bad in North America, and just for the record, it fucking is. The way they've systematically stripped away residual payments and just like the pay of people in general in Hollywood on film sets. But did you know that in South Korea they're on the verge of striking as well? The South
no.
Korean Actors Union. And the reason for that is that Netflix set themselves up not as a studio, but as just like a generic tech employer there. So people who work for Netflix as an actor or a writer in South Korea don't get residuals at all. The guy,
Ha.
the guy who, um, the guy who created Squid Game, which brought in close to $1 billion in new revenue for Netflix, got paid several $1,000s
Wow.
and no residuals. And it's one of the most critically acclaimed things
Mm,
they've ever done, and one of the most popular and profitable things they've ever
that's
done.
insane. So what's it going to change though? What's going to? They're just going to wait out the strikes. I don't think the strikes are going to change anything. At some point, they'll come back with some crappy deal, and at some point, the writers are going to be so hungry they have to take it. Like, what's going to change? How is this model going to
I mean,
change now?
that is definitely a potential outcome. My personal hope is that there are so many prominent people supporting the strike. Like we talked last week about Dwayne Johnson,
Mm,
Dwayne the Rock Johnson, donating 7 figures to the strike fund, and apparently a number of other people have done the same thing to keep everyone paid and kept up during the striking time. But I think that the studio's short sightedness will eventually betray them. You know, you have
mm,
multiple CEOs talking about how like the strikes are great because they're saving money right now. But what they don't
mm,
realize is that the reason they're saving money is that they're not making movies and TV shows, and they're in the business of selling movies and TV shows, which means they're not going to
mm.
have any to sell next year, which means they're not going to make as much money next year. And if they would
Yeah.
just pay these people the like if they just paid the people everything that they were asking for, it would cost them less than the losses they're going to have to suffer next year as a result. And
Mm,
I don't I don't get that short-sightedness.
mm,
I don't get why business is so short-sighted in that way.
mm,
And again, the other thing to consider is that like A24 signed a waiver saying that they agree to everything the union wants, so all their films are still in production. Dropout, which is the streaming service owned by College Humor, um, went to their lawyers and went to the union and realized, and they figured out that their work is not technically struck, and so they just agreed to everything, and now they're back in production. And if
mm,
all these smaller studios can do it, the big studios can definitely do it.
mm,
So, and I think it basically, I'm sure I've said this before, but I think it betrays that like the AMPTP I think is being led by Netflix, and I don't think that Netflix's model is sustainable.
mm,
Like if, as with any business, if your business model depends on exploiting the workers, then it is not actually sustainable. It is just exploitative.
mhm.
And I'm just betraying my increasingly radical left wing stance at this point, which we've been ranting about for 10 minutes. But this is all very much like They Cloned Tyrone, which is a good movie.
uh, sure. I mean, yes, it's yeah, let's loop back around because we could just talk about this for hours, can't we?
Yeah, I mean,
The state
I'm
this is in.
I'm very upset.
The yeah,
It's, and I'm not even a member of these guilds. I'm not. I won't work in film. I just like to talk about movies, and I
mhm,
just want the people who make the movies I love to be fairly compensated.
yeah.
So there it
It's,
is.
it's just such a basic thing. And it used to happen before some tech site took out blockbusters and then got ideas above the station and suddenly stopped paying residuals. I don't know. I don't know how they expect things to be made, quote unquote, capital C content to be made, if there aren't the artists to make it. And I think they're betting big. The most recent job post was for a head of AI. I think they're going big into removing humans as much as possible from just creating stuff that they can get people to watch. And if AI will do it, then they'll let AI do it. They don't care about the fact that it'll be shit, as every fucking AI thing that is meant to demonstrate how good it is absolute fucking shit. Uh, it's I don't think they care because it's just like we said, the shotgun approach.
Well, and again,
Anyway,
it's not. It's all about just having content, not about having content
yeah.
that's any good.
They Cloned Tyrone. So I have no idea. You really like this film. I have no idea if I liked it whatsoever. I am an absolute like contradiction of emotions because there are some parts I really, really liked. I thought John Boyega was fantastic. I thought Tayona Paris was wonderful. Really hated whatever Jamie Foxx was doing. Yes, he was doing what he was told to do, but his 70s pimp character felt so out of place. I'm in no position to judge this, but I was watching it thinking, is this a pastiche of a black person? Like, this almost feels like an SNL pastiche of a black person moving through society. Like, is that okay? Like, are they okay with this as a representation? Because I can't answer this, but I trust John Boyega a lot, and so if he's in it and doing his thing, then it's got to be fine. But I just found his character so annoying. They needed three people. I like team ups like this, and they had John Boyega and they had Simone Paris's Yo-Yo character who was great, and I thought she was great. And there's a character we see earlier who brings Fontaine his money in a pizza box, and he's got perpetually hot, and he's got a little electric fan, and he's got these funny little quips, and I think I would have much loved that character to be the slightly bumbling third wheel who turns out to be the one that everyone likes. I think that would have been a much better dynamic, but I understand also that Jamie Foxx has star power. So if you have Jamie Foxx in your movie, you make him part of your core. But I just found his character so annoying. It actually disrupted my enjoyment of the movie, and that lessens as the movie goes on. He becomes a lot more honest with the kind of person he is as it goes on. So I liked him a lot at the end when he's just being his honest self at the end. But I I didn't like it earlier. I really like the tech. Not sure about the film grain. I think there might have been an issue with the audio recording in that I literally didn't understand some of the lines that were being said, and I changed some sound options as well. Uh, I I loved the Act Three was great in how it confronted the problem, and I really like there's one moment where you see something and then you find out how you get to that setup, and that's really satisfying. Like, it's a really well made movie, and it did really remind me of a Boots Riley kind of movie. If you've seen Sorry to Bother You, it's got a very similar kind of style to it in the way it's shot and edited. It's really, really good. But then when you get to the 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 moment like in the Matrix where he meets the old guy who reveals what's going on, I found that deeply unsatisfying as a resolution. But then there's a bit right at the end that I found very satisfying. So what I'm saying is I both enjoyed and really disliked this movie pretty much at the same time throughout. And when I finished this movie, I didn't feel like I would watch it again, but even though there were some parts I really, really enjoyed. And so I'm just really confused at
I wonder
my
if you
reaction
would.
to it.
I wonder if a second viewing would cement anything for you.
I don't know. I
Because
have no idea.
I feel like for a lot of I don't necessarily disagree with anything you're saying about the way Jamie Foxx's character is portrayed, but I also feel like that works for me. Is that like him being a version of himself that he presents to the world versus the way he's more of his authentic self at the end. I think is kind of the point. um,
Yeah.
and I found that the way it decided to, I mean, having two characters sit down and have a conversation is not exactly the most cinematic way to resolve a situation, but I found that conversation between the two characters you're speaking about very interesting, and very like it might come across as maybe anticlimactic, given what's happening like immediately before that, but the reveal of who these characters are to each other, and there's a third person in the room and who that person is to them as well. I found it all super interesting, and I think maybe that it's a little bit frustrating. Maybe again is the point, because it's really you understand that there's this like huge underground conspiracy to make changes to society, but then like the reasons for that and how they're accomplishing it and what exactly the changes they're trying to make are, I found super interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and not exactly what I expected, but in a good way.
Mm.
And I I legitimately do think that like in a just world, we would have been talking about this in the same breath as Oppenheimer and Barbie. I didn't full blown love it like I like those two movies. Um, but like this is a solid 4 out of 5 for me, and will almost certainly end up in my top of the year list. So yeah, I love this movie a lot,
Mm.
and I'm mostly angry that it's going to be buried by the algorithm. So
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, as we've as we've demonstrated, that was terrible. It's a 2-star movie for me, if I'm honest. There's a lot I liked, but I'm interested why I didn't love it as well, because there's so much in this film. That kind of idiosyncratic tech is like absolutely my wheelhouse. Like I love stuff like that, and I loved I didn't like Act One at all. I quite liked Act Two and really liked Act Three, but then within each of those bits, there were moments I both really liked and really disliked. So uh, it's just the oscilloscope of my opinion of this movie is just a scroll across a page. I think if I'm going to land on stars, I it's not 3 stars. It's a 2-star movie for me.
it's so interesting. Well, know, sir, that you are in the minority. That it is.
Mm. Well,
Uh,
I don't care about that either. I give no shits about that whatsoever.
well, yeah, that's apparent.
I mean, yeah, I don't. I've stopped caring about where I fit into popular like opinion. My favorite game that my game of the year this year is the game that everybody has said is awful and everybody hates, and I've been playing it for the last week, and I haven't had that much fun in years. So
Wait, which game is that?
it's called Wanted Dead on the PS5. It's made by the Ninja Gaiden team, but written and published by um, a Swiss game developer publisher called 101 Industries, and it has, without doubt, the worst scripting and voice acting you have ever heard in your life. And I am including every other game you can think of with bad voice acting. For the main character, they hired a Swiss, oh, she might be German, a model who has never voice acted before. And oh boy, is that apparent! But the lines don't line up with each other at all in terms of tone, and also the whole thing has these weird like anime cutaways, and it's this big conspiracy that's never explained. And it is just the gameplay is a mix of swordplay and guns. And I posted a little bit on my Instagram, and you could do these amazing finishes. And it is brutally hard and just amazing. I absolutely adore playing this janky, weird 2000s PS2 action game in like 60 frames a second at 4K, with these amazing finishes and checkpoints that are so spread out you actually think if they're being masochistic with you. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm going to finish it. I adore it, and it has been absolutely like dragged over the tiles, and all the reviews like, oh, it's terrible. Blah, blah, blah. It's amazing. I love it. But
Well, there
anyway,
you go,
so yeah, yeah.
Captain Hot Takes coming in
No,
with
it's not about hot takes. I
two
just
hot takes at once. Look at that.
it's I don't even consider them hot takes anymore. They're just my takes, and everyone's takes are different. Everyone responds to art differently. We are but a summary of our past experiences, and everything we watch or interact with is reflected in that as well. So
That's true, but you dislike the thing that everyone else is liking, and you like the thing that everyone else is not liking,
so,
which makes
but
it
that
healthy.
doesn't matter. But that doesn't matter, is what I'm saying. It doesn't has no relevance whatsoever to anything.
No, fair enough. Well, they Cloned Tyrone, which is either a good or not good movie, is on Netflix now. Written by Jewel Taylor and Tony Rettenmeyer, and directed by Jewel Taylor in his feature directorial debut as well, which I think is also one thing we didn't even talk about
Mm.
because it is really well directed.
So,
Um, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
and and go search for it on Netflix because it's probably been buried by your algorithm, and which is terrible.
So the one thing I did want, my question for you in the bonus round, if you're a Patreon subscriber, and you should be, because it's only $2 a month, you get a whole extra round an extra episode that we record where we ask each other questions. My question for you was actually based on this because I don't think this will get a sequel, but it sets up a sequel really, really well, just like Us does. It's a very similar ending that introduces a group who want to go on and explore this mystery further and maybe resolve the mystery. I don't think it will get a sequel, but I would love it to. And that was going to be my question for you earlier: is like, what has never had a sequel, but you would love it to get a sequel? I think that the director. I'm really surprised to hear this is his first film. I would love to watch whatever he makes next. Um, but I also, as much as this is a 2-star movie, I would love to see the further adventures of clone fighting Fontaine and see where that goes.
Um, First of all, just to for the setup of this question, I don't think it needs a sequel, and I don't think that Us needs a sequel either. I think they're stronger for being singular. I think that the way that they end is open ended and ambiguous and asks a lot of questions on purpose. And I don't think we need. I want to exist again in a world where we're comfortable with art asking questions of us and not spoon feeding us answers. And I don't think everything needs to be sequelized. I think the questions this movie asks at the end, because there's a thing at the end that throws a lot of it into this new context, which I think is super interesting, and I think will and should be talked about. I think the end of Us is similar in that like there's a realization at the end of that movie um, that throws a lot of the context movie of the whole movie into a new light, and it asks questions about like about the self, like who we are and why we do the things we do. And I think that those questions being open ended is important. In the same way that like I've never understood the conversation around the end of Inception, like is he in the dream or is he in the real world? The answer is it doesn't matter. He's accepted his reality. That's the point, right? Like it's the wrong question, and I don't think we need to have that an answer to those questions spoon fed to us. So I don't think either of those films. I don't think this film needs a sequel. Um, in terms of like films that I want to see a sequel for, like I just want to see more movies. I'd honestly, in a lot of the cases where I can think of a movie, I can't think of anything off the top of my head because I'd rather see more new, interesting movies starring the people I like than revisiting the characters that I already know.
Yeah, that's fair. I wasn't talking about needing a sequel. I didn't feel it didn't have. I didn't feel like there were questions unresolved. I just like the end of Happy Death Day 2, the Scooby Gang getting together to go and further solve the mystery somewhere else. That would be fun.
I mean, I think in cases where a film deliberately sets up a sequel and then we never get it is maybe different, but like I would love to see Happy Death Day 3 because that movie very deliberately is like here's what's
Mm.
coming next. Not just asking an open-ended question, but like very very clearly being like here's the next thing that we're going to do. And so yeah, that I guess I mean yeah, I would love to see Happy Death Day 3. Let's put it
Mm.
there.
Oh God,
um,
if
but
only.
I do. I do think that like I do think we're true. I think we've entered a period in art making where a lot of the answers are given to us a little bit too easily, and I would like to get further away from that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
We're at
a
an hour and we
strong
haven't talked about. Yeah,
yeah.
we haven't talked about Joyride yet, so we should
Well, you
get
keep
into
getting
that.
me ranting about stuff, so I'm just going to blame you at this point for
Okay,
that.
fair
But let's
enough.
move on. So, they clone Tyrone on Netflix. Go watch. The next film we're going to talk about is uh, the 2023 film, which is actually technically, I think, still in cinemas, but is now available on demand. And it is the uh, Teresa Teresa Chow, and I'm going to say this wrong, but Cherry Chiva Pravatdarong written, and Adele Lim in her directorial debut movie Joyride, starring Ashley Park, Sherry Cola, Stephanie Sue, and Sabrina Wu. And this is a story about four women who are two of them. Ashley Park plays a woman called Audrey, and Sherry Cola plays a woman called Lolo. They grew up as the only Asian girls in their predominantly white town, and they are best friends. And they end up having to go for reasons that I'm not going to bother to explain because they don't matter. They go to China, and while they're there, they meet up with Stephanie Sue as Kat, who is an actress and who is Audrey's former college roommate, and they also bring Deadeye, who is played by Sabrina Wu, and is Lolo's cousin, and they end up on a raunchy road trip comedy movie that is basically funny from start to finish. I don't want to spoil any of it, but basically, if you've seen a raunchy road trip film, then you know all of the beats this is going to hit, and all of those beats are hit incredibly well in this movie. And Stephanie Sue uh, gives another performance that I think is maybe we give her an Oscar for this. If we didn't give her one
Huh.
for Everything Everywhere, we give her an Oscar for the scene where she has to pull a Coke balloon out of her butt. I'm just because it is a committed and hilarious performance.
Yeah,
And
committed is the word for sure.
yeah, and um, Ashley Park as Audrey, whose character is like the main emotional arc of the film, gives a pretty wonderful, nuanced performance about what it's like to not know who you are and to come to know who you are through not just the antics that happen in the movie, but through the people that she meets. And there's a reveal about 2/3 of the way into the movie about who she is and her own history, and it throws everything into sharp relief. And I thought she was great.
Mm.
I have never seen Sherry Cola in anything, I don't think, but her her line deliveries are just perfect at any given point. Anytime she has to say anything that's even slightly ridiculous, she has that. She has a very specific type of line delivery, which maybe you've seen before, but maybe you haven't. But the way she says things, she's one of those people that has the ability to make things she says funny, which
Mm.
is an underrated skill. But I think the only thing I've even seen her in is I think she had a voice in Turning Red, if memory serves.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, I think she did. Yeah, she played a character called Helen. Uh, um,
Oh, is that her?
and then I don't think I've ever seen. I don't know that I've seen Sabrina Wu in anything, but she has had a long career of being a writer and improv performer, and I think that everything her character is maybe the most like stereotypically like this person is clearly on the spectrum and not quite sure of their sexuality type thing. Um, but again, they do everything they do ends up being funny, uh, up to and including when they all get together and have to sing "Wet Ass Pussy" to get out of a hard situation.
K-pop style.
K-pop style, yeah.
A cappella K-pop style wet ass pussy. What I loved about Joyride is how confident it is, and it doesn't hide how uh, like it's a really sex positive movie. There's a lot of sex in this movie, and my wife watched it too. And the thing she said after it, and she loved it, and she said that she loved how they didn't. feel embarrassed by all the sex they're having, and they're always in control of whether they are having that sex or not. And it's not
Yeah.
just about consent in the moment; it's about giving, like, it all felt very unforced, and it's a very, very sexually graphic movie. But and she made a really good point that I didn't really think about. I think in lesser movies, there's one moment where someone says, "Did you sleep with him?" And they, in lesser movies, they might have like tried to cover it up or be embarrassed because it was maybe um, it's something the kind of multi-person interaction you probably wouldn't usually have. And it comes in a night where everyone kind of has an experience of some kind, and they do two things. They are like, yeah I did, and it's not made into a big thing. It's not a major story point, and no one tries to hide it. But it's also not, I don't glorified, exaggerated is a better word. It was just like, yeah, did you? Yeah, I did. Oh, cool. And then they just move on with their lives. And
Well, I think you're
uh,
talking. There's a scene in the middle where one of the characters has you're talking about when she has the multi-person encounter, and then they're having breakfast the next morning.
that's exactly right. Yeah,
And I don't think, if I remember correctly, they don't even like point it out. I think like just those two other people walk by, and she just like holds up two fingers to her friend as they walk by. Like it's so perfect.
yeah, yeah. It is.
Like it's all
It
very
is.
implied in a way where, but it also where it feels like these two people are very clearly like lifelong best friends, and they can communicate
Mm,
that way and know exactly what their each other is
yes.
thinking. And it's
Yeah.
not like stop to explain that, right? Like we just sort
Yeah.
of get that they're communicating and we know what they're saying, so it works.
It's very authentic, their communication with each other, and the the uh, the movie really accelerates through a growing number of really ridiculous situations. I mean, it's a very hangover template, and in that you've got the straight edge one, you've got the slightly wilder one, then you've got the person clearly on the spectrum who grows to be loved by everyone by the end, and then Joyride adds a fourth component to that. But it brings enough to the table of its own identity, and I think I kind of wish it had done better in cinemas, because I think like Asian representation, like a confident, sexually confident and active and forthright Asian women in cinema is something that I feel like if I was that person at that age, I would want to see this. And it's one of those movies where things really snowball, like stupid ideas snowball into further stupid ideas. And there is a really nice thing that's referenced earlier on that is then revealed later that is truly uh, shocking and amazing. And hands over face, open mouthed. Like, this movie does not hold any punches, but it also has like stupid little things. Like, Stephanie Hsu's character is engaged to this godly man called Clarence, played by Desmond Chainwin, and it's very clear that she has created an image of herself as this famous actor now, who is very pure and very innocent. And of course, Ashley Park's character Audrey knows very well she had an encounter with the Jonas Brothers at university, and she was certainly very sexually active, and she's trying to hide that so she appears more pure for this guy. And so she's in a there's an opportunity later where she for because of certain chemicals that may or may not have been imbibed up to her asshole, she's very, very horny, and she manages to get relief from that without actually cheating on her partner, which I thought was a very clever move as well, because I was totally expecting her to have like an affair, one night stand to sort of scratch that itch, and they managed to scratch that itch without her cheating and also her being in control in a very specific way to scratch that itch.
You
And
are you're dancing around this, and like there's
yes,
don't be
yeah,
wrong, there is no way to not dance around this if you don't want to
right,
spoil it. But yeah, what you're talking about
absolutely.
is great.
I
Like
just think it's a really well written and very authentic and very clever and actually quite a sweet movie, in that she doesn't cheat on her fiance, and they're not ashamed of these sexual encounters, and they do look after each other. and there's one moment where they make a decision to maybe hide some drugs, and there's no conversation of is this the right thing to do. They're just like, fuck it, we're all in, let's go. And they
Yeah.
and the whole movie is just lovely. It's just really, really nice. I would say that not all the jokes landed for me. But I think the second half of the movie is much stronger than the first half of the movie, in terms of how a bit more natural it all feels. But uh, Sabrina Wu's dead eye cutaways are some of my favorite like line cutaways in the whole movie. There's some genuinely brilliant moments where she sort of says something under her breath, and Stephanie Sue is just one of the most watchable actors. I've only seen her in this and Everything Everywhere, and I just think she's wonderful. I need to watch Miss Maisel as well at some point. But Ashley Park as well. I haven't seen her before, but she was brilliant. And Sherry Cola, just a lovely dynamic and a lovely kind of more earthy sort of humor and approach. And it was just great. It's a very fast movie. It doesn't linger really on anything until it does, and then towards the end there are some very like emotional moments as well. And it's a very sweet, clever movie.
So you have seen Ashley Park in something else because she was in Beef, which I know you loved.
Oh God! Of course, of course, of course.
Yeah.
She was great in that too. Yeah, yeah. Of course.
But yeah, everything you just said is pretty much accurate. Um, yeah, everyone in it is great. It's really sharply written. It's actually really well directed. And I think you mentioned that not all the jokes land, but I don't think that's a not every joke needs to land, because it's the kind of movie that's funny enough that if a joke doesn't land, you just wait a minute for the next one, right? The next one will almost
Mm,
certainly make you laugh. It's so funny throughout that there's always going to be jokes that don't land, but they don't matter because you can just wait for the next one.
mm,
Um, and I think the second half is definitely when it gets a bit sentimental. Like Daniel Day Kim, who, for the life of me, like, why is he not a huge, like, he's a well-respected character actor, but why is he not a huge star? But he just shows up in the last act of the movie to be like, to
mm.
suddenly become the film's like emotional compass. And it's just wonderful how,
He's so
like,
good. Yeah.
he's so good, he's so sincere, he's so like warm and loving right at a moment where the movie needs someone to be that.
Mm,
um because it's so well written. And I can't. So this movie became available on demand. It was a $20 rental or a $25 buy, and I spent the extra $5, and I have no regrets. I am
mm.
certainly going to be watching this movie
Oh yeah, it's
over and
really
over again. It's
rewatchable.
going to
Yeah.
go right in the list alongside movies like Eurotrip and Bridesmaids,
Mm.
where
Oh, for
it's
sure.
just like where you watch people. And interestingly, though, not really The Hangover anymore. I don't really vibe with that as much as I
So
used to. But like
no,
movies that are very confidently ridiculous. I think confident is a great word for this kind of movie, where they are 100% in on their conceit and they just run with it. Uh, I think this is a great example of that.
yeah. Um, the Hangover is an interesting comparison actually. So the first one in particular, it shares a lot with it, and I quite like the first Hangover. But this film is substantially better than Hangovers 2 and 3, purely because
I mean, that might be because
Hangover.
Hangovers 2 and 3 are not good movies.
Yeah, I mean they are bad movies, but one of my main takeaway from Hangover 2 especially is that it decided to go really nasty. Like
Yeah,
whereas this movie is very supportive and everyone's kind of with each other even when they're arguing, and of course there's a big argument, but that it's through everything's done through love and support even when it gets more and more ridiculous and they put themselves more out there. And Hangover 2 and 3, they decided to just up the nastiness angle of it. And so this film, like the comparison with Hangover, and the reason why you would watch this more than Hangover, I think, is really accurate as well. Because a lot of Hangover is
it's quite mean.
from us a more, yeah, it is mean. It's a much meaner movie, and this is not a mean movie at all. Even when people are disagreeing with each other, it just feels like that sisterly bond, which I think is a very particularly female thing that I think men would benefit from having a lot more, actually. And
Yeah, I mean,
it's
even even
That's
the big
nice.
like second act moment where, as in every version of this movie, where there's a moment where someone says something that's nearly unforgivable, but and then they all separate, and they come back for the third act and reconcile and save the day together.
Mm-hmm.
But even that feels it's not. It's from a place of like, what am I trying to say? It's not mean, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is mean, but it's not like spiteful. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the what is said comes from a place of like self doubt, not anger.
Yeah.
It comes from one of the characters' own vulnerability, not from a dislike of anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's far more like emotionally authentic as a result.
Mm-hmm. So how
Uh,
many stars are you giving Joyride then?
4 stars, I
Mm-hmm.
would say.
It's a 3 for me. It's a 3-star movie. I really, really enjoyed it. It's lovely. It's definitely something I'm going to watch again.
Yeah, I was fully expecting you to give it 4, to be totally honest.
Mm.
Just based on one or
I
two of Stephanie Sue's line reads, which like
Oh, it has the best line. It has the best single line in any movie of this year, and her delivery of it is that. And I kind of don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen the movie. It's in the trailer though, which I kind of wish it hadn't been
is it
because
in the
I would have
trailer?
enjoyed. Yeah, I would have enjoyed like spitting out whatever I had in my mouth at that moment because it is a perfect line delivery. She is a brilliant actor, and this is like Oscar-winning single line delivery. Um, it's just amazing.
What's interesting to me is
So
that like I'm not actually sure which line you mean, because the line I thought you meant is not in the trailer that I've seen.
oh
Um, but
yeah,
like
I'd seen it in
most
the
like
trailer.
what you're describing as the way she reads her lines is accurate to most of her lines in the film.
She's got brilliant comic timing and delivery, and I think that's more apparent here. It was pretty clear in Everything Everywhere as well in the way she handled that character with such sort of irreverence and humor, but darkness as well. So you could see it there, but she's got really good comic timing. I just want to see her in anything. I just want to watch everything she's in now
I still
because I
haven't
thought
caught
she's
up with
great.
the last season and for sure, but I think season and a half of Mrs. Maisel.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
she's also like her line delivery, her character and line delivery in that show is also just superb. And I
Hmm.
feel like
I believe it.
I'm glad that that show is sort of maybe not her big break, but like the one that got her wider attention, um,
Yeah,
because she's
she's
wonderful in it.
she's great. Good. Yeah, no,
Good.
it's 3. I much preferred the second half to the first half. I felt some of it didn't land in the first half, but I really love the second half. But a 3 is a very respectable score value for me.
Yeah,
It might
that's
go
fair.
up. It might go to 4 next time I watch it. It might go up. I get the feeling this is going to be a bit of a pop star situation in that I I I'm definitely going to be rewatching this movie many times, and it's very likely that it will go up a little bit when I do.
I mean, Popstar is another great example of a film where it's uh it's very very funny, and it's all very sweet,
Yeah.
very good hearted, and
Hmm.
the that movie starts with the characters sort of divided, but the eventual
Hmm.
reveal it all comes from the self, not from any mean
Hmm.
spiritedness.
Oh
not
no.
not from not from a character's selfishness, but from a character's vulnerability. I feel like that's a much more cathartic reveal.
So at an hour and 18 minutes in, I feel that is my mistake to get you talking about Popstar because that's another like day's worth of recording right there.
You're not wrong. Just wait until you finally watch Master and Commander, sir.
Oh shit, yeah. I should do
Yeah,
that. I should get around to
we're gonna have to like record a special when you finally watch Master and Commander.
that. What if I don't like it though?
You'll be wrong.
Okay, we
Like
should finish
all art,
there.
all art is valid. All art is
Apart
subjective.
from
All
that.
opinions are valid
Uh,
about art. But if you don't
okay,
like
good.
Master and Commander, you
Right,
shall
that's
be
the
wrong.
cutoff.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Got it.
yeah,
Copy that.
yeah. It's also just from Russell Crowe's like best period, which is basically The Insider all the way through to probably 310 to Yuma, maybe one or two after that, where he basically made banger after banger.
True story. The Insider was the movie that made me realize I don't like Michael Mann movies. Anyway, on that bombshell.
Whatever you say, Admiral Hot Takes. Well, let's end the show there because I don't have the bandwidth for that. So thank you so much for listening. Well, wow, sorry. I'm still reeling from what he just said.
Yeah, I don't like heat either. But anyway, let's wrap up.
What?
Don't like
you
it.
don't like
We're
Collateral?
not getting into this.
You don't
No,
like...
I haven't seen Collateral.
Oh, God. God damn, sir.
He didn't do Manhunter, the original Manhunter, did he? That was that Michael Mann?
I think so.
The OG
The
Manhunter.
first Red Dragon adaptation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
that's
that
Michael May. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like that. Anyway, let's wrap up.
I just... what? Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes, that's right. Thank you for listening. We very much appreciate if you're new here. Welcome. If you're not here, we appreciate your continued listening. If you'd like to support the show and hear more of our takes, the best ways to do that are to share us on the socials. There are so many socials now. I'm just going to link to our respective homepages in the show notes. But we are on the show, and are both on basically all the platforms. And Simon is on a couple of them.
No, I'm just on Instagram now. That's it. Go to temporarypen.com and you'll find
I'm mostly on Instagram of the 17 million socials there are now. Instagram is the one I seem to have pivoted to the most. So find me there at SmathuAF. If you'd like to support us more directly, again, like 5-star reviews, subscribe, tell your friends. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/MCSimpson. Starts at $2 a month. Canadian for you Americans, so it's like 48 cents. Which I think is totally worth it to hear us talk about other movies in a less structured way. What else? Again, this is where we say that we fully support the WGA and SAG-AFTRA and their strikes against the studios. We hope that comes to a resolution and everyone gets a fair deal. But we're not holding our breath either. And last but not least, we record this here in Vancouver on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. One last time, this has been the Awesome Friday Podcast, and thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, bye.